Just because you've received $200,000 from us doesn't entail any obligation on our part. My eldest son's wife admonished me, despite my footing the bill for their new house. Reflecting back 15 years to when my husband passed away, it was an immensely challenging period to raise children as a single mother. The bankruptcy of Lehman Brothers had triggered waves of recession, making job opportunities scarce, particularly for someone like me who could only manage part-time work at the time. Full-time employment felt like a distant dream. How he persevered through those hardships and pulled myself out of poverty, I managed to purchase a new apartment for my eldest son and his wife. However, instead of gratitude, my eldest son's wife continued to show disrespect. Frustrated and at my wit's end, I turned to my son, asking if he had anything to say while his mother was being treated so poorly. His indifferent response stung. "See what happens when you stop paying." That moment, something inside me snapped. "Well then, I will," I declared, cutting off all payments. And thus, I am Emma, currently 53 years old, a single mother who raised 2 boys on her own. I got married at 20, bore my eldest son Edward at 22, and 3 years later, welcomed my second son George into the world. Life was good with my loving and family-oriented husband, who worked for a small to medium-sized enterprise. Our modest lifestyle reflected our financial situation. We made do with the cheapest groceries, indulging in grilled meat only on payday. Tragedy struck when my husband died in a car accident, leaving us without his income. The savings we had set aside quickly dwindled, and I found myself working tirelessly to make ends meet. Despite my efforts, full-time employment eluded me, and part-time jobs paid meager wages. I refused to resort to work that exploited my sexuality, despite the potential for higher earnings. Desperate to improve our situation, I turned to the computer my late husband had purchased and explored ways to earn money online. Starting a blog titled Single Mom's Child-Rearing Struggles, I subtly incorporated affiliate marketing, hoping to supplement our income. To my surprise, the blog gained traction rapidly, attracting attention from online articles and magazines, resulting in a steady stream of income deposited into my account every month. Requests for lectures started pouring in, and before I knew it, I had earned the title of Queen of Affiliate Marketing. Leaving behind my day and night part-time jobs, I made affiliate marketing my primary source of income, hosting lectures and seminars on the side. Suddenly, I found myself living a lifestyle so opulent that it seemed unbelievable compared to the days when I struggled to afford even a school backpack for George. However, as our financial situation improved, cracks began to appear in our family dynamic. Edward, basking in newfound extravagance, neglected his studies and ended up failing a year of high school. Refusing to repeat the grade, he dropped out altogether, immersing himself in the nightlife scene and falling in with a troublesome crowd. Looking back, I realized how foolish I was to get carried away by my newfound success, neglecting my role as a mother. Caught up in the whirlwind of lectures and accolades, I failed to be there for my sons during their crucial adolescent years. Instead, I showered Edward with money whenever he asked, oblivious to the harm it was causing. While Edward spiraled into trouble with the law, George, in stark contrast, remained steadfast in his studies, distancing himself from negativity and injustice. Their paths diverged drastically, straining their relationship. George, witnessing Edward's aimless existence, voiced his concerns, urging me to stop enabling him. Determined to help Edward find purpose, I secured him a job at a publishing company through a connection. Yet despite my efforts, Edward's disregard for responsibilities led to his eventual dismissal, leaving me frustrated and disappointed, especially considering the publisher's support in turning my success stories into books. I found myself apologizing once again, this time for the irresponsibility of my over 20-year-old son. However, to my surprise, they offered their own apologies, admitting that our guidance had been lacking. It was a bitter experience for all involved, leaving no one feeling fulfilled. Feeling unfit to be used by others, I resolved to venture into something on my own. Despite his own lack of perseverance, Edward finally expressed an interest in starting his own business. I invested in his venture, an import business, only to suffer significant losses when he treated it more like a series of sightseeing trips than a serious endeavor. Optimistic due to my extensive network of friends, Edward then turned to network marketing. In support, I purchased pots and water purifiers, hoping for success. Unfortunately, this too ended in failure. Matters worsened when Edward registered George as a member without his consent, damaging their relationship and leading to more apologies from us. Despite these setbacks, Edward met a woman through his network marketing efforts and began discussing marriage and future plans. Hoping it would inspire responsibility, I supported him once more, buying a new condominium for their home. However, their life remained unstable, and they forewent a wedding ceremony. Their next idea was to open a wine bar in New York as a couple, and I provided the startup capital. With Edward now 30 and married, it was clear he couldn't rely on his parents forever. Despite previous failures, we decided to open the bar as a corporation, both holding representative rights. Despite my warnings that this was the final chance, Edward remained indifferent. He boasted about his import connections, but seemed more interested in nightly gatherings with friends than in running a successful business. Despite my efforts to guide him, his behavior left me speechless and disheartened, especially when his wife suggested marketing tactics to keep the bar afloat. As his mother, witnessing Edward's drunken antics, I couldn't help but feel a mix of disbelief and disappointment. His irresponsible words still lingered, but it was his wife's attitude that truly disgusted me. "My family is super wealthy, you know. Though I might not look like it, I'm from a good family. So I can help out if you're in trouble with money," she'd say, holding an empty wine bottle. Her favorite phrase. I had only met her parents once during the marriage introduction, and they didn't exude wealth. Her imposing older brother, Kevin, who seemed to be in charge, made a stronger impression. Edward's odd fondness for his brother-in-law left me uneasy. Months after the shop opened, it was hemorrhaging thousands of dollars monthly, depleting all the startup capital I had provided. Despite my efforts to cover the deficit, Edward and his wife remained unconcerned. Distraught, I turned to my younger son, George, for advice. Though he had been avoiding Edward since the network business incident, he listened kindly and promised to investigate. A week later, I visited the shop again. It was nearing month-end and rent and utility deadlines loomed. The shop should have been bustling, but it was empty except for Edward, his wife, and Kevin's group, all getting drunk. Approaching Edward, I calmly expressed my concerns. But before he could respond, his wife interjected, her speech dripping with entitlement. Her callousness was too much to bear. "You promised to work hard with Edward," I retorted, unable to stay silent. "What is this situation?" I couldn't understand why they spent every day getting drunk with Kevin's friends. Today, I decided to confront them about the situation. I didn't anticipate a satisfactory response from my clearly intoxicated daughter-in-law. Instead, it was my brother-in-law who spoke up. "What are you talking about? If you close the shop, it will only damage your own reputation. After all, you're a joint representative," he asserted, lounging back on the sofa with a domineering air, showing no respect for his elders or relatives. "You're just nouveau rich who doesn't know how to use money. That's why we're spending it for you," he continued, bombarding me with unbelievable words. Overwhelmed by his audacity, I finally became emotional. An exchange of heated words ensued, and I couldn't hold back any longer. "I'm the one who provided the money to open this store and for your apartment. How can you say such terrible things?" I exclaimed, feeling the weight of my husband's absence keenly. Unable to tolerate the insults any longer, I turned to Edward, hoping for support. But he remained silent, even as his mother was being insulted in front of him. "Then try stopping the payments," he retorted callously, his words cutting deep. Something inside me snapped. "I'd be happy to do just that," I declared, leaving the shop with those words ringing in the air. As I exited, I heard her shouting after me, as if to ensure I heard her challenge. Days passed, and at the turn of the month, they summoned me to the store. It seemed they were feeling the pressure from all sides due to the missed payments. Reassuringly, George agreed to accompany me. Arriving at the shop, I found Edward, his wife, and Kevin waiting. Kevin, ever the provocateur, remarked sarcastically about George's presence, insinuating he was my bodyguard. Thankfully, Edward clarified that George was his younger brother, and Kevin seemed to understand, his speech surprisingly clear without the influence of alcohol. However, I noticed something amiss. Edward remained standing while his wife and brother-in-law lounged on the sofa. Kevin wasted no time in addressing the situation, his tone heavy with accusation as he rested his feet on the table. I couldn't contain my anger at his utterly outrageous behavior and snapped back, reminding him that it was none of his business. But George intervened, urging us to continue as it wasn't entirely unrelated. Introducing himself once more, he revealed his profession. "I am George, an attorney. I am going to sue Millie and Kevin, who claims to be her brother, for fraud and embezzlement." His calm demeanor left the three of them puzzled. "When did you become a lawyer?" Edward asked incredulously, as George had still been a high school student during the network business incident that caused a rift between the brothers. Since then, Edward and George hadn't communicated much, leaving Edward in the dark about George's endeavors. Undeterred, George proceeded to lay out the facts. "Firstly, Millie, you and Edward are living together in the apartment purchased by our mother, and you're working together in a store financed by her. However, since you haven't submitted a marriage certificate yet, your arrangement is considered a de facto marriage." Ignoring Edward's question, George pressed on. Interrupting, Edward turned to Millie in surprise, questioning whether they had indeed not submitted their marriage certificate. Flustered, Millie settled back onto the sofa, struggling to find her words. Realizing that George had likely uncovered this information beforehand, he smoothly continued. "In addition to that, Millie, you have been in an intimate relationship with Kevin for a long time and have been cohabiting with him right before you started living with my brother." Edward's expression shifted from surprise to annoyance. "Wait, is it true, bro?" he demanded, finally grasping the gravity of the situation. I couldn't help but glare at him as George laid out the damning evidence. "And aren't you staying at Kevin's house several times a week even now? This means you are in a state of de facto marriage with him as well. You have deceived Emma and Edward and used them for your money-making. This can be interpreted as a fraud charge," George asserted. My eldest son's wife was thrown into disarray by George's words. She turned to Kevin, sitting next to her, seeking clarification. "Wait a minute. What does this mean, Kevin? Didn't you say that it wouldn't be a crime as long as we were just deceiving Edward?" Millie admitted, out of sorts with George's accusations, revealing that she had deceived Edward at Kevin's instruction. Her admission left me astounded by her simple-mindedness. George continued to press the issue. "Kevin and Millie, both of you faked a relationship with the intention of earning money. Emma would not have bought an apartment if she knew the truth. So you owe her monetary damages," George stated firmly, leaving no room for doubt. Kevin, finally grasping the severity of the situation, radically changed his attitude and began to apologize, even prostrating himself in contrition. But George wasn't finished. "Aren't you reselling the expensive wine you bought in this store on your personal website? That's embezzlement, and it's pretty severe," George pointed out, impressing me with his thorough examination of the store's accounts. As Kevin's past offenses came to light, Millie interjected, revealing that they were both currently on probation. George explained that probation sentences are cumulative, meaning previous offenses would add to the current one. Millie realized the gravity of their situation, understanding that they might not be free for more than 20 years. With evidence of embezzlement, fraud, and monetary damages, George made it clear that they needed to be prepared for the consequences. The weight of their actions hung heavy in the air as the reality of their predicament sunk in. I may not fully grasp the legal intricacies, and George's actions might seem harsh, but it's clear these are serious crimes. Finally understanding the gravity of their actions, the two of them bowed before us in silence. "So I was a victim of fraud. Thanks, George, you saved me," Edward remarked, acknowledging George's role in uncovering the truth. However, when George announced plans for a civil lawsuit against them, Edward was taken aback, finding the situation too complicated to comprehend. Despite being one of the business associates, George sought damages for the store's losses caused by Kevin's mismanagement and warned Edward of potential criminal charges if he continued to turn a blind eye. As they pleaded for leniency, I realized George had been aware of Millie's actions since the network business incident. His dedication to justice and his meticulous investigative skills, honed while studying law and working at a detective agency, were evident. Despite his firm stance, I couldn't help but marvel at his growth from a bullied child to a capable adult. Ultimately, George chose not to press charges immediately, citing the statute of limitations for fraud cases. He observed their behavior, hoping for genuine reflection and change of heart, and change they did. Millie now works diligently at a nursing home, while Kevin dedicates himself to church duties as a priest apprentice. Even Edward, once a cause for concern, has distanced himself from his past associates and runs the wine bar with integrity. Their transformations give me hope for the future. Perhaps it's time to celebrate their progress with a launch party for the wine bar. And as I reflect on the twists and turns of this journey, I consider writing a book to capture the remarkable story of redemption and growth.